A $500 stock target requires a company that can withstand macroeconomic shocks and aggressive competition. When you look at Palantir's leadership, you aren't looking at managers hired to maintain a business. You're looking at the founders who have spent 20 years preparing for the exact AI era that we're living in today. Alex Karp is their CEO and one of the co-founders. He's been the CEO since 2005. And like we've mentioned before, there's a huge advantage for a company to be founder-led. And the reason being is it's not just some fancy new exec coming in to take the CEO role. No, this is the person who is there from the very start. This company is their baby, and they're going to put in the extra effort into it. Think of the past big tech companies and how great they became when they were founder-led. Amazon when they had Jeff Bezos, Microsoft when they had Bill Gates, Apple when they had Steve Jobs, Meta today still being led by Zuckerberg. You can see that they have that little extra edge because Zuckerberg is that founder and he has that extra drive to continue to grow the company that he started. Palantir has this with Karp. For Palantir, Karp provides that spiritual and philosophical counterweight to the traditional tech CEOs. He famously rejects the mainstream Silicon Valley culture and he openly prioritizes national security and Western defense. And one thing that proves out this point even more, if you try to look up Alex Karp on LinkedIn, the man does not even have a LinkedIn. He doesn't need to build out a resume and update his fancy accomplishments because he's not leaving the company that he started. It's Palantir or nothing for him. And that's what you want in the CEO. Next up, Steve Cohen, also one of the founders. Now, this name you probably won't hear of much because he's not on the calls. You won't hear him on the earnings calls. You won't hear him on any analyst calls. Now, he's the operational engine that bridges Karp's philosophical vision with the software reality. Next up, Sham, the CTO, and previously he was the COO for many years up until 2023. Now, he's incredibly vocal and articulate about the software pipelines. He's the mastermind behind their forward deployed engineer framework, where the engineers will go to the customer's location and work with them directly. And this really has helped ensure that Palantir's coders work directly on the factory floors and in war zones, not in their isolated tech bubbles on a corporate floor somewhere way disconnected from their customers. And Sham has been at Palantir since 2006. Next up, the CFO, David Glazer. He's been with Palantir since 2013. And he's guided Palantir from a deeply unprofitable cash burden entity into an S&P 500 heavyweight with a fortress balance sheet and 60% adjusted operating margins. Then we have Ryan Taylor, who's the chief revenue officer as well as the chief legal officer. And he's been at Palantir since 2010. So he manages the legal complexities that come with Palantir's business of dealing with highly classified defensive contracts while simultaneously leading the commercial expansion teams, which have driven their US commercial growth up to 133%. So, what you can see with Palantir's exec teams is they've all been here for a very long time, which is very unusual. For most public companies, oftentimes you'll see the execs jump in ship after a couple years once their compensation packages run out and a new company gives them the next big offer. But nope, not here at Palantir. You have people that have been here since the very start, and if they haven't been here from the very start, they've been here for 10, 15, 20 plus years. Next up, let's go ahead and look at the compensation and see how it aligns with us shareholders. So, one thing that they did that was unique, but very smart for them to do is when they went public, they created a third class of shares, Class F shares, for the founders. And really, what this does is it lets them remain voting control so that way nobody can come in and change the direction of Palantir and ruin the company essentially. No matter how many shares of Class A shares they issue, the founders maintain that key voting control. Palantir originally had 5 founders, but currently only 3 maintain super involved with the company and hold those key founder shares. So you got Karp, Teal, and Cohen. And when looking into how their equity compensation works is they focus more on time-based rather than tied to specific financial hurdles, which at first glance you would say, dang, like you want your executives to be aligned with the performance of the company just so they're not there to collect some stock-based compensation and then dip out to the next best option. So usually this would be like not the best sign to see, but in the case of Palantir, we can see these executives have been here for decades plus. So they've proven that they're here for Palantir and the mission. So the approach that they're using here is they're focusing on executive equity awards that are heavily focused on service-based vesting time and retention. So while they're not focused on performance, they are saying, hey, if you want these additional shares, you have to stay till next year. You have to stay till the next year after because every time you're staying, you're going to keep getting more and more shares. And while I couldn't really find anything directly focused on performance like revenue growth or EPS growth, it is indirectly tied to performance because if you're going to be getting stock-based compensation, you want the share price to keep growing because the set amount that you're getting will be worth much more if the share price is growing. So they are still aligned with shareholders by wanting to get the share price to continue to grow because in return, their SBC will be worth more. And one of the bear arguments you might have heard in the past was stock-based compensation, it's way too high. It's diluting shareholder value. And this used to be true. If we're looking at the ratio between SBC to revenue, you can see it was over 100% not too long ago, but they've consistently brought this down. And now, most recently, it's down at 14%. And if we're looking at overall in the tech and software industry, they're now within the normal range of the 5% to 15% range. And the reason tech and software companies do that is this is how they attract the top talent without having to burn cash and give out mega salaries. Next up, let's go ahead and look at the insider buys and sells to see what the leadership is doing based on today's share price. So for the executive team, they have a ton of stock options that constantly come in and convert. And then as a result, they're constantly needing to then sell in order to pay those taxes that are up and coming. And also, if we're thinking of like founders or even some of the other execs, most of them have almost their entire net worth tied up in the single stock of Palantir. So they must diversify, which has zero impact on their long term conviction in Palantir overall. But let's quickly glance through all of them and see what they're doing. So, Karp, if we just focus on the shares overall, in the past 6 months, Karp has increased how many shares he's holding. If we focus on Cohen, you can see the same thing. His shares overall have increased in the past 6 months. For Sham, same story. Shares have increased for in Palantir in the past 6 months. Now, if we hop down to Glazer, we can actually see that he's reduced in the past 6 months. So, not the greatest thing to see. Then for Ryan Taylor, the same thing. So, not the direction we would like to see. But as we mentioned at the start of this section, most of these execs have the majority, if not close to all of their net worth tied up in Palantir stock. Look at the 5 execs here. And you can see the amounts they have. So Karp holds $7.5 billion worth of Palantir. Steve Cohen holds almost 2 billion. Sham holds 658 million. Glazer holds just under 50 million. And Ryan Taylor holds 26 million. So most of their net worth is likely tied up to this. So as a result, them reducing some of their share count isn't a bearish sign because you can see the total amounts is in the multi-million dollar amount. So them diversifying to one, be able to pay their taxes is a must, and two, just to diversify into other areas to just safeguard their overall net worth and diversify just like us investors would do. We wouldn't want our net worth 100% tied up into one company. Next up, let's go ahead and look at the track record that the leadership team has when it comes to beats and misses for revenue and EPS. And the reason this is important is because it lets us know if when they come out and they say we're going to do X revenue or X EPS in the next year or any financial number, do we have confidence when they're saying these numbers that they'll meet it or beat it? Or are they just blowing smoke up the chimney and whatever they say has no credibility? And the reason this is important because if you listen to them on an analyst day call, an earnings call, or even an interview, say on like CNBC, sometimes they'll leak out little hints about a future number that really helps us with projecting out future numbers so we can confidently think about where the stock should go in the future because of some financial measure that they're confidently saying. So if we're looking at revenue, pretty much always consistently beating. They had one time where they missed and it was by 0.1%. So you could say they essentially missed by a rounding error. Now, EPS, they definitely had a few more misses in the past, but keep in mind, 5 years ago, this was really when Palantir was just turned into being profitable. but definitely not as clear cut as those revenue numbers we were seeing in the previous slide. But look at some of these numbers in the most recent quarters when they've consistently been beaten. Some of these are by 20% plus. That's not just a small beat, that's a huge beat. Now let's hop over to institutional ownership. So let's see what the big money, smart money, whatever you want to call these folks. I mean, they're essentially the people who have a much larger checkbook than we do. And what we can see is over 60% of shares are held by institutions, which is a great spot to be because this shows that they have confidence in Palantir and it shows that they are seeing predictability with the numbers that Palantir is posting so they can confidently project out to future years. Now, if we were seeing something really low down in like 5, 10%, then that would mean there's a disconnect that they do not believe in the company and their future. If we saw it on the flip side, something super high like 90%, 95%, then that's difficult because there could be limited upside because you couldn't have big money then come in to start pushing up momentum once the stock starts running then at that point. And then one little bonus to throw in here is the culture. So Palantir has a very unique culture, both on the shareholder side, it's very polarizing. They either hate Palantir or they love the company. And the same goes for within the culture of working there. So if you talk to anyone who's interviewed at Palantir, you'll often hear how difficult it is to actually get a job there because it's very common for engineers to interview at big tech companies like Meta, Amazon, Google, and get offers from those companies but fail to get one from Palantir. That just shows how difficult it is to get in the door. And then once you're in the door, employees often do not leave. And it's largely because of the mission that's driving the company. So they're not working to optimize some ad click algorithm or build social media scroll features. They're working on mission critical infrastructure, preventing cyber attacks, tracking human trafficking, and streamlining global supply chains. This creates a high retention, hyper focused wartime culture that allows them to deploy code faster than any bureaucratic legacy competitor. So they're not just looking to get customers to continue to doom scroll on some site. They're actually driving huge change to better the world out there. A relentless wartime culture is exactly what allowed this leadership team to build the ultimate weapon for the enterprise AI race. Hit subscribe down below because in part 3, we're breaking down how Palantir's explosive AIP bootcamps are scaling globally to permanently capture the enterprise market. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.